Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. Today we are going back and finding 10 old broken cards that we can go and put in our modern day commander decks. So let's get right into it. After you guys click on that whatnot link and claim your free $15. Additionally, you guys can get 10% off all of your Tolarian Library proxies whenever you use code DT4D. I'm now sponsored with Baron of Dice. This means you guys can get 5% off whenever you guys use the code DT4D or click the link in the description down below. I'm a huge fan of the awesome art on their deck boxes and just the way they look in general, and you can pair up those awesome deck boxes with high quality playmats that match those deck boxes. Thank you, Baron of Dice, for sponsoring this channel. Now let's get right into the list. The first card I have for you is in Dimir colors. It's one generic and then hybrid black and blue for both of the other two. 3 CMC. Whenever a creature is put into a graveyard from play, you may pay 1. If you do, Cemetery Puca becomes a copy of that creature and gains this ability. So this is basically a card that whenever a creature dies, you can have it become a copy of that creature. This is going to be very good in your strategies that care about creatures dying or creatures with very powerful die triggers, because you sacrifice something like Kakusha the Evening Star, turn your Cemetery Puca into Kakusha the Evening Star, and then you sacrifice him right afterwards, effectively doubling up on your die triggers for at least 1 turn. This can also just be very powerful and flexible, right? If your opponents are playing powerful creatures, which, let's be honest, your opponents are playing powerful creatures, you get to remove those creatures and then you get to steal those powerful creatures or turn Cemetery Puca into those powerful creatures. Not a bad card, very flexible. Kira Great Glass Spinner is one of those cards that's a double-edged sword, but very good in a specific strategy. I love my stompy playstyles, and this is very good in your stompy decks. It's only 3 CMC, 1 generic, and then 2 blue. Legendary Creature Spirit has flying, and creatures you control have whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or an ability the first time it is countered. This is very good because I find that people don't like to hold their counter magic, right? They like to just play it, get their value. If they leave 2 mana open, they want to spend that 2 mana before they untap because they're trying to be efficient. This means if you have Kira on the battlefield, your opponent's probably going to eat the removal spell instead of you, even if the right choice is to remove something you have. And then they also have to collude to kind of get rid of this card. It's kind of board wipe, or they have to spend 2 removal spells to get rid of Kira, or they have to spend 2 removal spells to get rid of another thing, and Kira is still on the battlefield. So this kind of ends up being a board wipe or bust scenario, or you just overrun your opponents with your massive board state that they can't interact with. Scion of the Wild is a type of card that I'm always looking for. I love Power Matter strategies, and in Power Matter strategies, you want very low cost creatures that have a high power, and this one has a very high ceiling and not a very low floor, if that makes sense. This guy costs 1 generic, 2 green, and he's a creature avatar that says Scion of the Wild's power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control. So with your commander and him on the battlefield, he's a 2/2, but really sky's the limit here. If you guys have a Power Matter strategy that wants to go wide, this guy could be massive, and you're sacrificing him to a greater good effect to draw a ton of cards. Again, I'm always on the lookout for these cards that have low CMC and that can have a very high power, because again, in the right deck, they just absolutely explode, and then whenever you're actually able to cast them again and again from the graveyard and sacrifice them over and over again, it kind of just feels broken and unfair, and those are the cards that I like to include in my deck. Altar of Bone. This is honestly not a great tutor spell, but I honestly had no idea it existed, so we're going to talk about it. This is 1 white, 1 green. You sacrifice a creature to look through your library for a creature card and put that card into your hand. After showing it to all players, reshuffle your library afterwards. So basically, sack a creature and then you get to find a creature and show it to everybody. This is very mana efficient, and it's just another creature tutor we have access to in Selesnya colors that, again, I had no idea existed. Aether Flash is one of those cards I was kind of talking about yesterday when I did my Staxy video. This is a card that really benefits having a specific game plan. Aether Flash is a 4 CMC enchantment that's 2 generic and 2 red, and it says whenever any creature comes into play, Aether Flash deals 2 damage to that creature. So if you're playing a very, very stompy deck, you want to kind of hate out the early game and even token strategies, because you typically have a lot of big creatures that can easily block any creature our opponent controls. Where this becomes a problem is whenever your opponents have 100 1/1s. That's just not going to be good, right? They can easily attack into you and kill you no matter if you have like 9/9/9 blockers. So this is one of those cards that just benefits going into the late game with big creatures, and it kind of just makes all the token strategies at the table irrelevant. Bloodfunnel is a card that again wants a very specific strategy, but the ability is so broken I wanted to talk about it. This costs 1 generic and 1 black. It's an enchantment and it says non-creature spells you play cost 2 less to cast. And then it says whenever you play a non-creature spell, counter that spell unless you sacrifice a creature. So this is a kind of strategy that wants to be able to generate a lot of creatures, and then you also kind of want to be able to sacrifice those creatures for value. Where I see this seeing play is your strategies that want to kind of storm off, and they're also generating creatures whenever you're casting spells. So maybe you have like a young pyromancer and it says whenever you cast a instant or sorcery spell, you get to generate a creature. Well, now that's going to generate a creature for you to sacrifice to Bloodfunnel, and it's going to reduce all of the cost of your instant and sorceries. So again, this one's a very specific strategy, but I think it's going to be very strong if you have a strategy that wants this and can utilize it. Dawn of the Dead, this is also another card that I just didn't know existed, and the ability's not bad. This is 2 generic and then 3 black. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may lose 1 life. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to play. That creature gains haste until end of turn, remove it from the game at the end of turn. What I like here is you can sacrifice it before removing it from the game and just keep returning the same creature over and over again. For decks that again need consistent sack fodder, and maybe that sack fodder needs to be massive, I like cards like this because you can easily return it from the graveyard every single turn, and you're always going to have at least 1 creature to sacrifice. Good with powerful enter the battlefield effects, and good with powerful leave the battlefield effects as well. Dire of the Undercurrents, again this is 5 CMC, and then you have 2 of the hybrid costs for black and blue, so this is in Dimir colors. It says whenever a blue creature comes into play under your control, you may have target player draw a card. So now every blue creature, we get to draw a card. And then it says whenever a black creature comes into play under your control, you may have target player discard a card. So this is very, very strong in your token strategies that are blue and black, especially if you're specifically making blue and black creatures. Now, I wouldn't say you need to have blue and black creatures to play this, because if you're just generating a lot of blue creatures, that's still a ton of card advantage. And then again, it just becomes disgusting if you're generating a lot of specifically blue and black creatures. That's going to cause you to not only take away all of your opponent's cards, it's also going to give you a ton of card advantage at the same time. Viridian Revels, this is a card that's becoming more and more relevant. It spiked for a little bit and it's a little down right now, so I think now's a solid time to pick it up. And if you guys weren't aware of it, here we go. Viridian Revels is 1 generic and then 2 green, and it says whenever an artifact is put into an opponent's graveyard from the battlefield, you get to draw a card. Now again, this is very meta specific, but I think treasure tokens are just everywhere now. Clue tokens are everywhere, and everybody's just sacrificing artifacts for value. So I think you can actually just play this now and almost always benefit from it, because someone's going to be playing a treasure token based strategy. I almost guarantee it. Last but not least, I have something for all of you jank combo players out there. We have Will of Sun and Moon. This is 2 hybrid colors in Selesnya now, and it says enchant aura, enchant player. If a card would be put into enchanted player's graveyard from anywhere, instead that card is revealed and put on the bottom of that player's library instead. So what kind of jank can we do here? We can do a lot of stuff like with abundance that makes it to where you always have a creature put on top of your library. If you're playing a creature based strategy that wants to specifically sacrifice creatures, you get to sacrifice that creature, and then you can always ensure that you kind of draw another creature back, and you're going to recycle your creatures at the same time. So you could kind of make it to where if you're playing a 0 cost creature, you could play it, sacrifice it. If you have an effect that says draw a card whenever you sacrifice a creature, you can put the creature back on top and draw it again, and kind of just infinite draw and die triggers. So there's a lot of weird things you can do here. You can also kind of win the game with infinite extra turns. We can play a card like Chance for Glory that allows us to get an extra turn, but we lose the game after that extra turn. And then we can play something like Angel's Grace that allows us to not lose the game. So as long as we can activate Sunforger twice a turn, easy, right? Super easy. You can kind of just go infinite here and take infinite extra turns, because we have Wheel of Sun and Moon constantly putting our Chance for Glory and Angel's Grace back into our library. Again, super janky, but I think there is applications for this. Specifically in my Hydra deck, I'm considering it because it's a Hydra Aristocrats deck that wants to cast Hydras again and again and again, and there's a lot of ways to generate mana whenever we're sacrificing the Hydras, so you can kind of get into a loop where you're just always casting Hydras. I don't know if I'm sold on it yet, but I definitely want to try it out. With that being said, guys, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and hope to see you guys in the next one.